So, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 32 of the Deercast. Today, we are joined by someone who's been asked probably the most ridiculous questions I've ever come across when we did a listener question poll on Instagram. And claim to fame, I think he is the first person where one of the questions was, "Is he single?" So, without further ado, we are kindly joined today by Warren Broad, deer manager and deer stalker for Deerbox over in or near Cirencester. Welcome to the podcast, Warren.
Evening, gents. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So, importantly, because all the listeners will now want to know, are you single, Warren?
I am not.
Well, there you go. Sorry to
lovely girlfriend. Yeah.
And sorry to disappoint.
As well, brings out animals quite well.
There you go. Sorry to disappoint whoever that was in terms of podcast listener, but there you go. You now know. So Warren, relationships aside, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into deer stalking and how you ended up where you are today?
Yes, of course. I've always had a fascination for deer from a young age. I think every youngster is fascinated in normal things like football or rugby, but mine was always deer. I was born on the banks of the River Severn, where there were no deer, zero deer. We had no deer. So seeing deer was quite a fascination for me. Obviously, father, we're from a agricultural horse racing sort of shooting family, and father picked up on the interest of deer for me from a young age, alongside gamekeeping. If I wasn't particularly academic at school, so I was either away beating or helping someone on a shoot somewhere or whatever I could really. I think the first animal I shot was a roebuck in Dumfries and Galloway on some clearfowl when I was up there on a family holiday. And then sort of, done the classic red stag West Coast experience. Sort of by the time I was in secondary school, I was sort of assisting a couple of estates, just, general dog's body, helping drag animals, gralloch animals, just learn whatever I could. Finished secondary school, went up to Inverness, worked on a grouse and deer property there as a sort of trainee. Then thought I probably should get some paperwork. So come and studied at Sparsholt College in Hampshire, where at that point I was still very much, although I loved deer, I was going to be a gamekeeper. That was what I was going to be. Studied there for 2 years, went to Norfolk, which was where I was sort of given my first opportunity on what I would class as a big deer operation, sort of 700 or 800 animals off of 18,000 acres, roughly, something like that, probably. And they're probably doing a lot more now. I think when I was there, Chinese water deer were just sort of on the fringes. Now I think they've got a lot of them. And the chap there who sort of gave me the opportunity sort of was the first big stepping stone to full-time deer management, really. Moved to Dorset. Still doing birds, still thought birds were the option for me whilst sort of doing deer alongside. And then I just woke up one day and thought, I don't want to do birds anymore. I just want to do deer. This is something that I'm much more passionate about. And 3 months later, I had a rucksack and was on the way to New Zealand after accepting a job offer in New Zealand. So I'd done 16 months out there of guiding and deer farming, sort of seeing how they farm the deer, as well as working on a large hunt operation, sort of assisting guiding. We'd done, chamois, arapawa, rams, tar, fallow, reds, New Zealand goats, all of that sort of stuff alongside trout and salmon fishing. Really enjoyed that. Sort of what it was in the Southern Alps of New Zealand, so pretty quiet. So decided to come back home at some point, even though I like a quiet life. There's only so much time one man can spend in a mountain on his own before he starts to go a bit crazy. So decided to come home, moved to Marlborough to take on a property there. And that was just before anyone knew of COVID coming. COVID came, the shoot and everything closed, just stopped. So I went back home to Gloucester and carried on shooting. I had my own grounds, sort of thing that I've always managed deer and boar on. So I was just right. How can I sort of try and create something from this? And then, quite honestly, falling into Deerbox was an accident, a well-timed accident. I was selling wild boar carcasses to Mike and Ben. I went to drop off some wild boar carcasses at 10:30 one night after I'd been out shooting, and Ben was there skinning some red deer from the previous day's culling. And as much as I like Ben, he looked like he was struggling. So I said, "Do you want a hand?" And he said, "Oh, yes, please." And I proceeded to spend the next 3 Wednesdays, I think, Wednesday evenings, just helping him skin some animals. Obviously, you just sort of got nattering, become friends. I sort of knew Mike beforehand, and Mike knew of myself. And it kind of just happened from that, really. So it went from just sort of doing my own bits to looking after whatever Mike and Ben sort of required initially. And then it's just grown considerably. In 4 years, I've taken acquisition of more land. Ben and Mike have acquired more land. We've obviously started the processing company, and sort of that's where we are today. And now 90% of my time is taken up with, deer.
Sounds amazing. I mean, can we just wind back quickly to New Zealand? Because I had no idea you've gone there for 18 months. What's it like over there in terms of sort of hunting culture? And you said you were guiding.
It was, so I was farming and guiding. So I looked at commercial farming of red deer, where they had like 3,000 head of red deer, and it was pretty spectacular to see how they were doing it. And get the opportunity to work with these animals and see how they done it, and see why the venison was so sought after, kind of thing. And then obviously through the season we were doing this with this guiding operation. But hunting in New Zealand is so much more accepted and normal. You can drive through towns in New Zealand, particularly in the South Island where I was, and it is completely normal to see a pig or a stag strapped to the back of the ute going through town, pulled up outside the cafe. It's normal to have antlers and bodies on utes and people seeing them, and they still have hunting competitions, and it's really a cultural thing as well. But it was just, you were almost a bit odd if you didn't hunt or have some attachment to hunting. It was kind of the other way, whereas over here I feel obviously there's a lot more pressure from sort of outside world to be frowned upon, I suppose, for what we do.
Yeah. I mean, I watch. Do you watch Ronji Productions on YouTube?
No,
it's the only thing I've seen of New Zealand hunting, and you should go and watch his channel. It's brilliant. But he just goes to, there's like a public land, isn't there? In
lots of public land. Great, public land is awesome.
It looks amazing, and they literally just trek into these like woodland places and fire across like enormous, like 700-800 yard shots across valleys and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah,
it looks amazing.
Yeah, I would. If anyone's thinking of going out there, even just for a hunting holiday, go and check it out. It's a pretty cool place. Even if you don't want to go with outfitters and guides, there's people do public land, that guiding that will help you, or just go out there and do it on your own. But obviously, it's a pretty wild place. So you got to know what you're getting yourself into, otherwise it can be pretty deadly.
So the only bit I've seen, it says on YouTube, is it the Clark Boys? So I think there's
So another one I would recommend watching is a bloke called Can Adams. He does a heap of it, and he runs a big pest control company, and his videos are pretty good. Yeah. And he's just he's a really good guy as well.
As Harry says, like they seem to shoot at much longer distances, I would say, than what we typically shoot at here in the UK. What is completely normal for them is shots I have never ever and probably will never take at.
The same again. The shots I was taking in New Zealand, I've not taken those sort of distance shots since I've been back in the UK because it's not required.
No. It's ridiculous. The stuff I've been watching on these Ronji production videos, they literally are shooting 1,000-yard shots with like a 300 Win Mag, and they have two guns and they both shoot at the same deer at the same time, just center of mass. That's
really?
That's literally all they do.
I noticed when the chaps I was with, a lot of them seemed big fans of that. At the time was the 7mm08.
Oh right.
7mm Rem Mag. A lot of them seem to be quite keen on those. I was still there with my old Tikka T3 and 308, trying to keep up.
So again, another thing, and you'll be able to confirm this because my only experience is via the kind of YouTube stuff I've seen, but they all seem to really like because I guess they're carrying their rifles all the time. They all seem to really like incredibly light rifles, but in quite punchy calibers.
Yeah.
Which to me just sounds so unpleasant. But I guess if you're only taking one shot at 500 meters,
it's only that initial one or two shots, but the fact is, before you take that shot, you've got to hike for 11 hours up and down mountains to try and find the right animal and spend 3 nights in a tent. Proper public land hunting is another world out there. And it was, if I wasn't working, that's all I was doing was right. What public land can I go on? You go onto the dock website, you see where's open, see where you can get permits for, see what you want to hunt, and they send you your permit via email, and there you go. And it's like, right, away you go.
Is it as easy as that? You just literally apply and then off you go?
You could go onto dock website now and say, I'm thinking of hunting red deer, and it say, show you blocks for red deer, and then you say this area, and it show you that where they know red deer are known in these blocks, and you go, okay, is that an open permit? Is there any restrictions at the moment? No restrictions. Great. Here's my details. I'd like a permit. And then 10 minutes later, they go, there's your permit.
Wow.
And then that lasts for about 3 or 4 months, I think.
Can you imagine if we had that over here? I mean, to be fair, firstly, no one would probably use it because, like, as we were alluding to, the amount of the population that hunts is so small. But can you imagine if that was like socially acceptable? That'd be awesome.
I mean, we don't have the vast expanse of ground that New Zealand has. So I don't think. I think even in the most remote places of Scotland, it would still be too small to do it.
Yeah,
it's no wonder it's such a big culture over there. That if you have the access to that much sort of ground. And I suppose, is deer management high on the agenda of New Zealand, like it is in sort of becoming?
No, it's quite different over there. So obviously, like, there's no hidden fact that New Zealand, genetically breed big red stags, to draw hunters in from around the world. There are some very good wild deer management over there. So you've got the Fiordland Wapiti Foundation. They are extremely good. FWF, you check them out. Last pure remaining herd of wapiti still in New Zealand are in the Fiordland Sounds, really heavily protected, and they've got a massive task on their hands trying to prevent the red deer from crossing with the wapitis as well. And you can't just go in and hunt these wapiti bulls. You've got to do a ballot system they do every year. Like, a few people are lucky to get in there, and they're really strict about what you can remove. It's really good to see. And then you've got people like Chris McCarthy. He's a hunting guy, but again, he doesn't breed anything. There's no fences. He's just about trying to grow big, natural, wild heads as they used to be found in New Zealand. But there's a place for everything out there. The big genetic, breeding and hunting operations, they are everywhere out there because there's the trade for it, there's the demand, but there's also, if you look in a few right places, there's people trying really hard to just manage what they have. But, we feel lucky to have a couple of thousand acres. They feel you go out there and it's like, oh, I've only got 40,000 hectares, and you're like, Jesus.
So when you're doing guiding out there, does that mean that you're not only sort of doing deer guiding, you're basically like a mountain guide as well? Are you having to camp with people, or is it?
Yes, they do. It depends what they booked. Obviously, there was a lot of different things they could book. It wasn't very often that I was on the. Can't remember what the term was, like the outback hunts. A chopper would pick us up from the hunt camp, and we would fly to a base camp, and you hunt from the base camp in the mountains. That was when they were doing tar and chamois. So you'd go out there and you'd do 2 or 3 nights. So they weren't exactly wilderness hunting camping. They were in like an MIA sort of plush tent or a small cabin sort of. You've got these huts dotted all through New Zealand that are on public land, but you've also got people that have them on their private land. So I tended to just stay on the main beat where the reds and fallow were.
So, and I feel like we're quizzing you on New Zealand. That's not really what we brought you on the podcast for, but I can't resist asking another question, which is that from the outside, it feels as though New Zealand have got a bit of an odd relationship with tar and chamois, in that they were introduced. Large parts of the population really enjoy hunting them. But as an outsider, it feels like there are some conservationists that want them wiped out because they sort of feel they're not a native species. They're doing damage to flora and fauna. And it feels, again, like to an outsider, that there's this kind of constant battle within New Zealand of, do we keep them, do we not keep them?
Yeah, I suppose it's similar to us with the likes of muntjac and Chinese war deer. Lots of us want them, but there's a lot of people that don't, isn't there? But I think they've become an asset to New Zealand. And also what people forget is there are very few places in the world that you can legally go and hunt Himalayan tar in their home ranges. New Zealand is like one of the last few remaining places where there's a stronghold for them. So conservationists that are wanting to wipe them out, I can't really see the conservation method behind that. I get because of the flora and fauna damage, but everything is fine in moderation, everything's fine in a balance. But to want to rid an animal that is, a red listed species from an area where it's got a stronghold seems a bit bizarre to me.
Yeah. So are you dealing mainly with foreign clients coming in for
when I was out there, it was we didn't do one Kiwi. It was all from abroad.
Yeah.
Because the Kiwis, they got it on their doorstep.
Well,
So
yeah, exactly.
They don't need a guide. They are their own guides,
No, they fill the boots.
Yeah.
So, Warren, we could probably keep asking you about New Zealand forever, but I feel like our questions, our listeners have asked lots of questions that they'd be quite upset if we don't ask. And then, as I alluded to at the beginning, I think for you we've had probably the most ridiculous amount of ridiculous questions that I've ever seen in my life. A quick mention just of two of them. One of them from Al Hayes. Do penguins have knees? I mean, thanks, Al. I think one from, I'm guessing, must be your brother, who said, "Is there truth in the rumor that you're the second favourite son?"
And I can't believe we've even brought that up in the podcast. Can't believe you've done that to me.
So, I mean, just like ridiculous. So, I mean, you've got a very cruel bunch of friends, but just starting with a serious one here. And this is from Bucking Around TV, and he said, "Why don't Deerbox take bucks between October and December? If it's to do with the flavour, is there a solution, i.e. chorizo?"
That's a very good question, and actually, I suppose there's a two-sided answer to that question as well. So, from a venison processor perspective, looking from Deerbox's side, obviously, anyone that stalks, particularly we're talking about the herding species, Fallow's Red Seeker, we know how they get in the rut. We know the condition they lose. Deerbox is very strict on what we take in. We're not a normal game deal. You can't just rock up and sell to us. We work very closely with the people we do. So we put this sort of cap. Deerbox puts this cap on what we would accept purely on the quality of the venison from those animals over that period. And the other side, from my side, is what we are trying to do is the fallow, the herding species males have a long enough season as it is. You can shoot them before the does are in and hinds. You can shoot them after. So take the required ones earlier, early in the season when they're in good condition, when they're still doing the crop damage. If you've got to remove trophies in the rut, that's your thing, fine. But we don't want them. But then when the does come in November, leave the males alone. You've had time for them. You will have time after the does. If we really want to be sensible about deer management and look at the conservation efforts that we're doing for the ecology side of things, the problem is with the females. So it's kind of, if you're working with us, we're kind of trying to be like, can you just, females is where the problem lies. Can we focus on those whilst they're in? You can worry about the bucks and the males again when they put on their condition late, once they put their conditioner on back. And what we see is not until mid-December, New Year, that we start seeing condition on the older animals, because obviously they're losing condition going into the winter. So it's hard for them to put it back on. The younger animals, obviously prickets and that, they tend to lose less condition and put it on quicker. So that's the sort of two sides. There's the deer management side and the venison quality side.
Yeah. Well, you've got to look after your product, haven't you? Because it's sort of.
But the thing is, if we start trying to flog, rutted out bucks and stags to high-end restaurants, the feedback's not going to be great, because, in my opinion, and everyone's entitled to their own opinion, it's not great venison. No, the carcass quality isn't great. It's just not a great time to be eating venison. I find it's quite irony. It's quite strong. There's that taint about it. We're trying to encourage more people to eat venison, so I don't want to be selling them that. Could you turn it into things like chorizo and things like that? Yeah, I guess so. But that's not something we specialize in. So we're not going to start taking them just on the whim of, oh, well, let's try and make some chorizo. Maybe one day, but that's not where we're at the moment. Ours is just quality of the venison from one side and focusing on the females from the other.
Very good. Am I right in thinking you're starting to do some charcuterie stuff as well?
No, we sort of had a bit of a play around, and it's sort of an end goal would be to do a bit of charcuterie. But at the moment, we're looking at sort of productivity and growth of the company in what we currently do, not in sort of expanding into areas like charcuterie quite yet. But it is something we'd like to do, and I know our head butchers, they're very keen to do it. But again, it's time allowing at the moment.
We we should say as well, for anyone that's desperate to know more about the sort of background to Deerbox and what sort of Deerbox does, we have had Warren's colleagues, Ben and Mike Robinson, on the podcast before. So feel free to go back and listen to those episodes as well, if it feels like we're slightly kind of glossing over some of what Deerbox does. I did just chuckle to myself, Warren, because I saw some of the other like horrendous questions that some of your friends have asked, but glossing over those. I've been asked one by Rory Hoppy, which was, he says, boar management in the Forest of Dean. We lack the knowledge of Germany, but allow anyone to have a go. Is that okay?
Yeah, boar, the touchiest subject in UK deer stalking, in my opinion, wild boar. We do lack what most European countries seem to have on knowledge. Every other country seems to live alongside boar and work alongside them, yet for some reason in the UK, they are ridiculed. And I understand from land management and land farming point of view and agriculture, there's, again, it's about that balance. The whole letting anyone have a go at them, well, we can't control who's shooting what on their ground. As for the likes of ourselves, you know, if you want to come and shoot boar with us, you can. But that's through a guided situation and you're told what can and can't be shot, you know, so it's not just going out willy-nilly. But I personally think the boar get a lot harder time than they need to, particularly in Crown-owned land.
Got it. Interesting. And sorry, I'm being very selfish in asking questions that I actually want to ask.
That's fine.
I have been looking through some of these, and actually some of them have made me laugh so much, but I don't think we can actually say some of them.
No, probably not appropriate, yeah.
I think we're going to have to develop a blacklist, because some of the people who've asked questions, you should never be allowed to ask a question ever again. I mean,
and there are some serial offenders. Okay?
Yeah,
you know who you are.
Matt from Grove Game Larder, we're coming for you. Dirty man.
Honestly. The question I was going to ask is about actually the sort of, because we never really experienced anything to do with the supply chain of boar. What's it like as a product? I've actually never shot a wild boar in the UK. You know, how does that work alongside doing, because they're very different products, aren't they, really?
Yeah. Well, first off, in relation to you not shooting a wild boar, come and try and shoot one with us, both of you. Tick it off the list. As long as you're happy to sit in cold temperatures in the Forest of Dean, we can sort that.
We'll just cuddle for bodily warmth.
Yeah. And then what we find is the demand for boar is so high that the moment the boar goes on our website, it goes. It's on, it's gone. We can't get enough. We can't source enough. It's a slightly higher price than venison. You'll get you know, £3 a kilo for boar, whereas, you know, venison is anything, depending on who you sell to, from £1 a kilo to £2.50 a kilo if you're lucky. Boar's that little bit extra. Obviously, you've got to trichinella test the animals before they can go into the food chain. Otherwise, it's sort of treated fairly similar.
Interesting. I'm not surprised that it's in such demand, because it's an incredible product. Is it a problem actually, sourcing? Is it a real supply?
Yeah, I've got a few boys that I work with that do supply me carcasses, but it's sort of an ad lib basis of when they get them. Obviously, we manage our own ground and we sort of consistently shoot the same numbers sort of each winter, so we sort of know what we're going to get. But again, that doesn't necessarily all mean it comes into Deerbox, because if a guest has been out and shot one and he wants to take that home with him, then he takes it home with him, because we're very pro people using what they've hunted. So yeah, we would always like to try and get more, but it's just sourcing them. And it's actually sourcing wild boar, not farmed pigs or farmed boar or something like that.
And is that a problem of lack of actual animals being in existence in the UK, or is it more of sort of tricky to shoot them, tricky to find them at the right times of day?
I think there's a little bit of tricky to find them, depending, you've just got to have the right pieces of ground, but I think it's more just actually the number of animals for the demand is not there. I think, if you went back 5 or 10 years ago, the Forest of Dean had a lot higher population than it does now, which, is obviously had a big effect on the supply. And there's obviously rising populations in Scotland around, Dumfries and Galloway, Loch Ness, etc. I think that would be the next sort of big stronghold for boar will probably be Scotland. Obviously, they've got a bigger expanse of ground to be able to get away unseen. Whereas obviously the Forest of Dean, I can only speak from experience of that area, because that's the only area I really deal with. They're they're pretty persecuted on lots of ground. We try our best to manage them where we can. So, yeah.
So I'm quite glad someone else asked this next question, because it's one I would have wanted to ask myself, and it's in relation to copper versus lead, and it's kind of a two-part question from Miles K. The first one is, game dealers have self-imposed a lead ban. Is this going to unblock the venison market? And the second bit of the question is there less meat wastage with a copper shot animal versus lead?
Okay, first part. Are game dealers all going lead free?
I don't think they are.
No, exactly. So there was that original, we're all going to go lead free, it's going to be the thing, there won't be there's not going to be a lead bullet used in this country, and then it sort of fizzled out over 18 months, 2 years. We're still a lead free only operation, but I know that there's lots of people who still shoot lead and lots of dealers who still buy lead. So that also means, no, it's not going to help the market. But even if everyone was lead free, would it open up the venison market? No, it wouldn't. But what it would potentially do is encourage a few more people to try or buy venison, because it's another factor that is taken out of being a bit of an issue for people. That's what we've got to think from a venison selling point of view and marketing is anything we can do to make it more accessible for people that might have qualms about eating it, getting rid of lead. If that's one that helps other people get on board with it, great. Why not?
Very good. Yeah.
And the second bit of the question was, is there less meat wastage with a copper shot animal versus a lead shot one?
In my opinion, not a lot. Because if you pin a deer through the shoulders, the damage is fairly unanimous from lead or copper. You're going to lose a lot of damage. You're going to have a lot of damage on the shoulders, so do we have to trim more or less? I don't think we do. Obviously, different bullets have different effects on, which brand of, copper ammunition you're using. Some have performed better than others as well. So I think it's bullet choice more than sort of copper and lead of one better than the other. Obviously, we shoot copper. I shoot Hornady. I'm a massive fan of how it performs, but also kind of most of what I shot is not in the body, should we say. So actually, from a body shooting perspective, my sort of observations would be minimal to a lot of other people, I guess. But obviously then we see what comes into our facility for processing that's been shot, so we get to see that side of it.
And again, I'm slightly railroading the conversation here, but because when I came to see you, was it last month or the month before, you had one fallow buck in the chiller that had been chest shot, but was like ridiculously clean in terms of there was no bruising around shot entrance or exit site. And I remember asking you at the time, being like, what bullet have they used? Because that's ridiculously clean. And I think your answer was that in your experience, it's less to do with the bullet itself, but perhaps more to do with the placement.
The placement from when we are skinning all these animals from different people is the damage on the meat is very much a placement thing, in my opinion, is what I've noticed. The placement of the bullet is more important than the bullet you're shooting. However, you still have to have the right bullet for the animal, for your rifle, and that performs as it should with mushroom in or shrapnel in or petal in, whatever it does.
And in your view, where would be the best place to shoot a deer for minimal meat damage? Obviously, that's not always advisable.
Just behind the shoulder. Tuck it in the shoulder, so it's missing the shoulder plate. It's still going through the ribs. But what you're not doing is getting that initial fracture and causing the bullet to expand straight away. It's almost pinning behind the shoulder, then doing the damage internally, as opposed to starting the damage on the outside and going through. That's my findings. Is just really tight behind the shoulder blade, but not through the shoulder.
Interesting. If anyone's interested further in copper ballistics, go and listen to our Paul Hill interview.
Because I'm not a ballistics pro. I shoot guns and use bullets as a tool, and they're very good tools, but I'm not a ballistic nerd, I suppose. So mine is just from what I observe and what I see.
So again, as well as having quite a lot of ridiculous questions, we have had some quite philosophical ones for you, Warren. And
Right.
this one is slightly kind of stargazing, which is if you could change one thing about the industry, and I presume he's talking about the deer stalking meat industry, what would it be and why? That's from J Images.
That's a deep question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
What would I change? Do you know what I try and change? I'd love to see change is the mindset of British stalkers. That, in my opinion, it's a privilege to be doing what we do, but you are still there to serve a purpose for the land and landowners. You are not there for yourself. And I think a lot of people acquire ground, get into deer stalking. Obviously, this is not saying about people that book stalking. This is more for people that, manage ground.
Mm-hmm.
You are there to manage ground, not to do as you please. The mindset should be, I'm here to do a job for the landowner, for the, correct management for the ground, for the balance of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoying it is great. We all want to enjoy it. Especially if it's a passion. But the role of accepting that position as the deer manager for that ground means you need to correctly manage the deer on the basis of what is required for the ground and the owners, not what you think is correct. So even if it doesn't lie in what you think is correct, you are being asked to do it for someone. So you do it on their basis, not your basis.
Very good. I think that's quite apt. As a not an industry, but as a sort of collective, we tend to hoard ground, don't we? Sometimes when we don't have the time to do it, which shouldn't be the case.
If you can take on ground and do it properly, great. If you don't have time, you have too much ground. It's something you're doing recreationally, and it's not going to plan. You need to let someone come in that will, or you've got to change the priority of how you're doing it a little bit. But a lot of UK stalkers are, in my opinion, are only out there for themselves. That's the problem.
Yeah. No, very.
I could change the mindset of British deer stalkers to be a bit more forthcoming to what's required of the grounds and owners, not what they wish, would be top of my list at the moment.
Very good. And in that sort of vein, we've had a question from Dharma Deer Management, who's messaged in to ask, if/when do you think that recreational stalking will become a thing of the past? Does he think the government will ever step in and order professionals such as yourselves to properly manage our fallow numbers?
First off, he's called me a professional, which is interesting. Another deep question. I don't think recreational stalking will ever become a thing of the past. I think there's a place for recreational stalking, but it's a case of, is there a place for recreational stalkers that are sort of one for the pot, or as and when actually it's an area that needs correct management? So will the government step in and start saying, you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way? Hopefully not. We've seen sort of bits of that in Scotland, and it's not great to see. I get that as a nation, as the UK, the management side of things really needs to be looked upon, and I'm all for it, and I'm all for furthering correct management. Does that mean that maybe some recreational stalkers need to either do more or let it go to people who are going to do it? Then yes. I can't see recreational stalking being rid of. Particularly, there's a lot of people rely on recreational client stalking for their livelihoods as well. But as long as it's carried out in a sort of management strategy that works, then why not? But it's this thing of having ground with lots of deer on it, not doing a lot about them. You're not really solving anyone's problems, are you? So that's an issue.
It sort of ties into the last question, really, doesn't it? In terms of so long as we're all responsible and grown up about what we do, in terms of not hoarding stuff and not doing it poorly, then there is a role for the recreational.
But I think there's a role from the landowner's point of view. Particularly now with the government looking at more woodland grants, more farming grants to do with deer management. Actually, they've got to take in consideration that if they are being given this money for this grant, they really need to ensure that this is being carried out as it should be, because otherwise they shouldn't be receiving the money. If you're getting the money, it has to be done, with what's stipulated within the grant. And I think so landowners have got to take a bit more of, is my friend Dave from down the road doing actually is what required, or do I need to say, I'm going to bring someone else in to assist you, or carry it out, and you can come out, let them know and come out with one for the pot as you do, but I need to put someone in here that's going to do what's required for the land, for the grant, for myself, for the owner.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So another slightly sort of philosophical question for you. Sorry, I feel like we're really hitting.
I was going to say they're all deep questions.
They are. This one is from Gameliner by Tarrant Refrigeration, and it says, I'd love to know how he's tackled getting the general public more comfortable with eating venison. I've been surprised at how horrified some people have been at Facebook ads with images of deer on them when you can buy venison burgers in Aldi. The reactions on social media is like shooting the last black rhino in Africa rather than a farmed animal.
He does have a point with, some of the photos I see of, deer being advertised would not make me want to eat venison, that's for sure. I think, again, we need to look at maybe, it's all well and good being proud of what you do, just make sure it's presented correctly, because you never know who, on the internet and social media, who's going to see that or who's going to get hold of that. So I think, as a deer stalking nation, we need to look at how we're portrayed, particularly behind photos. Great, share it, be proud of what you do, don't hide about what you do, but just make sure what you're sharing is going to be fitting. If someone who is very sort of not anti-deer, but unknown to deer isn't going to see that and go, oh God, and I get a lot of the nation, I suppose, at the start of this question are not in tune with, they're in tune with their animal coming out of a plastic packet in the supermarket, as opposed to being harvested in a field. So I guess we've got to try and bridge that gap of, oh my God, I can't believe you're eating Bambi, to, oh, this is actually a really delicious, healthy, sustainable meat. And I think that the only way we can do that is by trying to get it into the areas of people who wouldn't normally see it.
Mm.
We can all, it's fine, us in the industry, we can all get it, we can access it, we know people that can access it, our friends and family can get it. What about all those people that just go to the supermarkets and aren't from the countryside? How do we get them to view it differently, or at least look at it? And I think if I can't answer that one, I think it's a much broader and more in-depth question, but it requires effort from every single deer stalker in England, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty fair.
Mike does a very good job of of just broadcasting what he's doing across social media platforms and TV and things like that. So, anyone who can do that, YouTube's, as long as it's presented in the right manner, great.
So a light-hearted one, because I'm conscious we've peppered you with a lot of questions.
That's right.
B some pretty serious ones. And this is from Leo, and he says, "Do you still enjoy shooting?"
Yeah. Yes, without fail. I think it would be it'd wear pretty thin, the job, if you didn't enjoy it. Obviously, I think as the years go on, particularly I've noticed my main interest and joy actually comes from getting the other people involved in letting them be behind the rifle with my support, as opposed to me shooting it. But don't get me wrong, there's, if I didn't want to get up out of bed in the morning to go and chase deer around, I would fall out of love with the job pretty quickly. So yeah, I get up every day, feeling like I'm in a privileged position and enjoying what I do. So hopefully that will continue. Hasn't dropped away in the last 11 years, so hopefully it won't do anytime soon.
Very good. I imagine quite early starts in the morning as well.
Yeah, I sound all chirpy now, but Roebuck season in summer is a bit of a trainer.
Yeah, I was going to say.
4 a.m. starts, 11 p.m. finishes, and you're like, and there is always a brief period in the Roebuck season. I'm like, why? I'm day 4 of 7. I'm like, why did I put them all in the same week? Why am I doing this? Running on 3 hours sleep. I've forgotten what my girlfriend looks like. The dog's knackered as I am. But then once it's all said and done, everyone's happy and you're happy, and I'm ready. And every year it comes around and I do it again, so I must still enjoy it.
Glutton for punishment, clearly.
Yeah.
Good. And then another question we've had from this one from GC Outdoors, and we did actually used to ask this quite frequently as one of our sort of Bobby's Bits questions.
Yeah.
But his question is, if you could eat one sort of venison, I guess, for the rest of your life, which would it be? And we used to actually also ask how you prepare it, what cut.
I would do. It's a sort of toss up between Sika or Muntjac. I think fallow's lovely. I think fallow's underrated, but there's just Muntjac's delicious, but it's such a small animal that there's not a lot from it. You know, it's a lot of effort for a small return. So I'd probably go with Sika for me. How would I do it?
Most people seem to do with Sika, actually. It's funny.
I'm not sure.
Never tried it.
I find it a little bit. I don't know if the term is sweeter, lighter. I'm not sure how to describe it because obviously everyone's taste buds are also a little bit different. But I think if you get a nice 8-bone rack of Sika and just, pan fry that, brown it off, just simple, but it's delicious. I don't think you can beat it.
This is going to sound really weird, but you wouldn't expect Sika meat to taste sweet because it's such an angry-looking animal.
Yeah.
It just I've never seen one in the flesh, but the pictures I've seen and the videos I've seen, it just looks permanently pissed off. So you would think like that amount of like hatred in an animal would taint the meat, but clearly not.
Like you always owe them money, don't they?
Yeah. So I'm going to finish up listener questions with being very selfish and asking a question of my own, and I know the sort of the answer to this as well, and that again that's why I'm being very selfish with it. So I believe you're a 308 shooter, aren't you, Warren?
There's the rumor mill is true. Yeah, I am. Call me old fashioned if you will. I am a 308 through and through. I've had a 308 since I was 18.
And so is that the reason you use it? Is it the kind of loyalty and just used to it since you're 18?
It is a bit of loyalty to the caliber. I think the way the world's going with all these new calibers coming out and the progressions, they're great. But the 308's been around for a long time, and there's a reason it's been around for a long time, because it works. And for me, it works well for me. I know its capabilities. That being said, I do now have a very nice 6.5 PRC.
Oh, Warren.
But let me just PRC, not Creedmoor, PRC.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's the important difference.
So what led you to go, you know what, 308, I love it, but at the same time I'm going to get something else.
I've got two 308s. I've got a Tika 308, which is my designated bore rifle. I've got a Savage PPR 308, which is like my sort of designated day rifle. And then Savage kindly, we'd been working with them and Mike, design a rifle, and they gave me a 6.5 PRC to trial. And trial it I did. And I found it very good. So I now have a 6.5 PRC in the cupboard, along with a couple of others to just why not? It's a very smart rifle. I like the caliber. It's there's a lot of oomph behind it, but it's still fairly flat. Again, they're all work tools for me. I think Savage, they gave it one about stress testing, and I think that was exactly what they gave it me for, because I'm pretty harsh on my equipment. I'm not probably too lovable towards it. It's a tool, and I probably do stress the guns out and the optics and everything else. But I guess that's kind of what they're looking for. Someone to treat it mean, throw it around, bounce it around, do whatever, and hopefully it still works at the end of it. And it did. So, so 6.5 PRC was added to the 308s.
Very good. And you mentioned you're loyal to Hornady.
Yes.
What are you using in your 308?
I'm on the Hornady Outfitter range. The one Hornady Outfitter is at CX in, I want to say like one. Oh, dear, this is caught me out now, so I can't even remember the grainage. But it's either 152 or 162.
Oh yeah, okay.
But yeah, the Hornady Outfitter round in both 6.5 PRC and in 308. I was on RWS Evo Greens before I went to Hornady. I did try Seiko for a while as well. Nothing wrong with any of them. The only thing that was wrong with the RWS Evo Greens was the price that came with it, unfortunately. They seemed extortionately priced, but then all ammunition is at the moment. But so working with Hornady's been great. We've sort of tried a few different rounds, and the Hornady Outfitters, the CX rounds have started performing. This is the third season with them now, second season with them now. Sorry, so probably I don't know, with target shooting, 1,000 rounds maybe.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We did do actually a test with the outfitters, and they were very impressive. The Evo Green stuff was pretty violent.
It was
the Evo Green stuff was deadly. But when it comes, the last thing I wanted to do with an Evo Green was body shoot, because I knew the mess that was going to be there, and it was just like, Jesus, people, I take it up, and the butchers are like, what the hell did they shoot this with? I was like, well, they is me, and with an RWS Evo Green, and it just hammered them home.
I shot 2 animals with Evo Green bullets. I bought a box. And it was roebuck season, and the first animal I shot with it was a roebuck at, I don't know, 50 meters, and he literally dropped like a sack of spuds, and I was like, bloody hell, these are the best things since sliced bread, until I got over to it, and it looked like I'd thrown a hand grenade at the side of this animal, and I was like, okay, maybe it's just because it was 50 meters. Next roebuck I had was 100 meters, and it was exactly the same, but that was it. Those were the only 2 rounds I ever fired.
I remember, a guest shooting a fallow buck with us, and I was using the Evo Greens, this was peak, right? They're a big, strong animal, and that went straight down. I was like, oh, Christ, that knocked it off his feet a bit. Maybe he's hit it a bit high or something. And no, perfect shot, but it was just the mess. And when I opened it up, I was like, oh my God. And and I again shot a few more in the body then, because I was curious more than anything. They all had the same results of me walking up to the animal going, Jesus Christ, so can't knock the bullet for knockdown power, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. And have you tried any of Ben's Nielsen Sonics?
He did load me a few for a while, and I moved to Hornady. They weren't the bullet for me. Their pedaling system and all of that sort of thing, it was grand, but it didn't have the result I was looking for on my animals. So I just, moved.
No, they're an interesting one, weren't they? They were the other one that were quite different to all the other ones we tested.
The pedaling was, the petals were going all over the place, I found.
Yes, that's what we found. Not to sort of speak ill of them, but I think we chest shot a few animals, and they sort of look like colanders at the end. You're
like, how did a petal get over there in that direction?
Yeah, but I'm sure for head or neck shooting, they're probably absolutely amazing.
I think most, head or neck shooting, most rounds in 308 are going to do the desired effect as long as it's put in the right place.
Yeah. And that, again, fun enough, was going to be another question I was going to ask, in that you sort of alluded to the fact earlier that most of your animals are not body shot, they're head or neck shot.
Yeah.
And so I wondered, what do you sort of do to make sure that head or neck shooting works for you, basically?
In what? Well, I suppose besides practicing and making sure you can do it, it's stay within your lane. I will not head shoot or neck shoot anything over 100 meters. The fact that the equipment I'm using is capable, I am not willing to risk that animal for over 100 meters of head and neck shooting. That's just my personal choice. So I either try and close the gap to 100 meters for a head and neck shot. All right, that's maybe a bit severe. Might find that I've shot one at 115 or something, you misjudge it, but I'm very strict on what I allow myself to head and neck shoot at, particularly head shooting. But it's either I try and get a bit closer, I let it walk, or I body shoot. So it just depends on the scenario, and each one is different. As you know, with stalking, every single one is different.
And when you sort of make reference to neck shooting, are you sort of front on, back of the neck, side of the neck?
So neck shooting, I would prefer a frontal back on shot. I do take side on shots with the neck, but I won't with the head because of the way the jaw sits. Again, it was just about that and knowing your animal's anatomy and the placement of the bullet. But I won't take side on head shots just because of the way the jaw lies, and I've seen it go wrong a few times. So that's a no from me. So heads are facing forwards, facing back, and neck preferably back or forth. But I will always shoot it high in the neck, as high as I can, sort of underneath the Adam's apple, essentially.
Yeah.
Is that from a meat preservation basis or from?
It's from a meat preservation basis, and it's from a basis that I want the animal down on the deck, not running anywhere, so I can bleed it, and there's no adrenaline hopefully pumping through it. And in my opinion, it's probably more humane, even though a well-placed body shot is the animal's dead on his feet, as they say, isn't it? But I want it down there on the spot, bled out the way onto the next one. If when I've got coals to me going out and body shooting and then spending half an hour every time they run off in feet 50 meters into the cover, it slows up the day a bit. So I just find it's a bit more productive for me if I'm out head and neck shooting.
So we've kind of strayed into kit and equipment with sort of bullet choice and all the rest of it. So we have slightly warned you about Bobby's bits, which is the next and final bit of our sort of podcast. You'll be pleased to hear, Warren. And the history behind Bobby's bits is that Harry's younger brother Bobby, who I believe you know, took a gap year. He was still living at home, had a full-time job, so he was earning plenty of money, living at home, mad keen on his deer stalking. So he went out and bought every bit of kit and equipment he possibly could lay his hands on, and made Harry and I very jealous for a year because he was constantly turning up with a new rifle, new scope, new sling, new whatever you could think of.
Yeah.
So this bit of the podcast is named after him, and it's we've sort of made it a two-pronged thing, haven't we? In terms of the first question we ask is, what bit of deer stalking kit or equipment couldn't you live without? And the second one is, if money was no object and sort of sourcing it was no object, what is the one bit of kit you would love to have?
I'm probably going to be a bit cliche with the what could I not live without, and go along the lines of either my thermal or my shooting sticks. It's probably cliche, and probably a lot of people have said it, but I would, if I forget my binoculars, I'm not too concerned because I've got my thermal and I've got my scope. But if I forget my thermal, I'm more inclined to turn around and go back and get it. If I forget my sticks, I'm probably just not going to go, because the ground I mainly shoot is not suitable for bipods. Not, I'm not just breaking a hazel stick off, and like you say, I've become so comfortable with shooting off of quad sticks that forgetting those is like forgetting my left arm kind of thing. That's I require them to carry out the job. So probably the sticks would be the one that I wouldn't want to forget the most, sort of require the most, should I say. And if I could have anything, Christ, there's so much I'd like if money was no object. And we're still talking about pieces of equipment, are we?
Well, Mike Robinson said a tank, so I think
if I could source it and there was no objects, a nice 50,000 acre property would be lovely. But equipment wise, I would probably say a nice handmade Holland and Holland.
Oh wow! Hang on. Is this a shotgun, a double rifle, a normal conventional bolt action, or I'm not going to say the K word.
I mean, if it's coming from Holland, I'm not going to be too fussy, particularly if I'm not paying for it. However, if it was my choice, I'm going to flip it a little bit and say actually a really nice handmade sort of large game rifle, open sights.
Oh, like a nice double. Extra Express.
Yeah, 475, 500, something like that.
Charlie's gonna be very happy with it.
I've got no reason to use it, but it'd be a great asset to have in the cabinet, and it's a talking point, and and I can't see a Holland like that devaluing over time either. So it's an investment.
I don't know if they actually make a kit bluff.
I'm sure a company like that, and I'd just like it on record. I did not say the K word, so it wasn't me. I'm sure a company like Holland, if you said to them, make me one, I'm sure they would.
They never say no.
No.
So there you go.
So yeah, that would probably be up there.
Oh, there you go. I think that's the first time we've had a double rifle mentioned as a piece of kit or equipment. So if Holland and Holland are listening, you've got a potential customer out there, guys.
Yeah, Luke, if you're listening, because he knows who I am, I'd love one, please.
Yeah.
I'd love to actually go deer stalking with a double rifle. Have you ever done that, Warren?
I haven't. I would quite like the concept of it, and to be fair, I've had trap open with hunting with open sight rifles. And Luke's been out hunting with some Holland and Holland equipment before, which has been rather nice. But yeah, no one's brought a double rifle out hunting with me yet.
You see them on sort of like Holts and things like that in
Yeah.
sort of sensible-ish calibers.
Yeah.
Like I say, I saw one in a 3006 the other day, and I was like, yeah, I fancy me a bit of that, a bit of woodland fallow stalking with a 3006 double rifle. Yeah.
I tell you what was really cool was I got the opportunity. I got invited out to Rhode Island in America last year with some really people I've become really friendly with called Jim and James Manny, and really cool blokes, and Kirk. And we went hunting whitetails with muzzle loaders and flintlocks because that was the season.
Wow.
And it was, I remember shooting at this deer, and it was like boom, and it was like, they were like, good shot. I'm like, I can't see through the smoke to know if I got it or not, but they're telling me good shot. But the deer just sort of vanished in a plume of smoke.
I'm told, because I've never fired one, there's also a bit of delay because you squeeze the trigger, it clicks.
Even on the muzzleloader, like, don't get me wrong, their muzzleloader's a lot more modern than like you would imagine now. But it's sort of, it's like the flintlocks, you click and you poof, and then 3 seconds later as it goes, and you're like, I hope the animal or I hadn't moved in that 3 seconds. Yeah,
it's a mad concept, isn't it? The different seasons for the different things. I mean,
going over there was a really learning experience of, again, just highlighting quite how lucky we are in the UK with our deer.
Yeah.
We can go out and shoot 7, 8, 9 deer in a day, and that might be their whole tags for the year.
Yeah,
it's very true. We have a podcast. Will actually be out by the time this comes out with a couple of chaps from Denmark, isn't it? Denmark, yeah,
couple.
Sorry, just one.
Yeah.
And we talk a bit about hunting overseas, and he came and spent a couple of days with us and was amazed how many deer that we have on our ground here, because they will literally shoot 1 or 2 a year, and they will go out as much as we will.
I really enjoy hearing and meeting people from different areas and countries to see, how they do it, what they have, how it is for them. And quite often, people come over here and the Americans are just like, this is great. Like, I can't believe you can just go out and shoot all of these.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mark, he's sort of become quite a good friend of ours. He came over, him and another came over from Denmark, didn't they? And they were supposed to be coming fallow stalking with us. And they ended up, for some reason, the week they came, I can't remember if the weather was rubbish or whatever, but we only saw muntjac, and the pair of them ended up shooting about like 8 muntjac between the two of them. And after like the first one, they were both sort of like, right, done, thanks so much, great trip. And we were like, no, we've got another like 3 days to go. And literally they worked their way through a load of muntjac, and they just thought it was the best thing ever, because it was probably their whole year's worth of deer they would have shot if they'd been back at home. And over here, like, we don't pay for it. Whereas for them, and again, you'll have to listen to the podcast episode about it, but the amount they pay per acre to share land with other people in order to go stalking on is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? How different everything is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. What a poignant note to end on, in fairness, of how lucky we all are. So, and again, we feel very lucky to have had you on the podcast, Warren, and for you to have spared so much of your valuable time to sit and chat to us. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Some very deep, meaningful questions in there, which was quite enjoyable.
Yeah, and those of you arseholes that ask some really stupid questions, we will be in touch. This is not over.
Yeah, I was going to say, just jot the names down and see if they crop up again. If they're repeat offenders.
They are 1 or 2 of them, and they know who they are.
And you know what the thing is? If one is say it's Grove Game Larder, it's Matt. That man looks like a repeat offender, Matt.
There you go.
That's very true.
I think we should invite people like him back on and basically just pepper them with their own stupid questions.
Yeah, or put them all in a podcast together and see how they deal with each other.
Yeah, that'd just be carnage.
But yeah, it did. I must admit, when I said to you earlier before we recorded, you put out on Instagram about asking questions, and then WhatsApp group on my phone popped up with numerous questionable friends in it, and some of the questions that were on there that didn't get reeled off to you guys, I was like, please don't. They still think I'm half respectable at the moment.
Well, thank you, Warren. You've been incredibly generous with your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
That's right, and I'll give you a shout for these boar when we get like -5, -6 or something like that, shall I?
That sounds perfect.
Thanks, Warren.
Cheers.